No one on the street ever paid much attention to the small blue house at the corner. It sat quietly behind a fading cedar fence, half hidden under a mess of overgrown vines. But on that warm Saturday morning, something about it pulled Emily's eyes away from her coffee. She noticed her neighbor, Daniel, standing in the yard with a broken shovel in one hand and a defeated look in his eyes. They had spoken only a few times in passing. He was polite, quiet, and always seemed to carry a weight he never talked about. Emily hesitated before walking over. She wasn't usually the type to insert herself into someone's business, but something about the way he stared at the garden made her feel he needed help more than he'd ever say. When she reached the fence, he looked up in surprise. His face softened a little, like he didn't expect anyone to care. "Morning," he said, brushing dirt from his hands. She asked if he was all right. He let out a tired breath and explained that he had been trying to fix up the yard. Apparently, the garden had belonged to his late mother, and he'd been putting off restoring it for far too long. Emily felt the heaviness in his voice. The garden wasn't just a project. It was a memory he was trying to face. She offered to help. Daniel resisted at first, insisting he didn't want to trouble her. But eventually, he gave in with a small, grateful smile. They stepped into the yard together. The grass was uneven, the soil dry, the flower beds fighting a losing battle with weeds. Yet under all of it, Emily could sense something warm, a story buried beneath the mess. They worked slowly, talking about simple things: weather, work, the way the neighborhood felt more like a small town than a city. At first, Daniel spoke with caution, like he wasn't sure how much of himself he should reveal. But the more they worked, the more he relaxed, and the more Emily noticed how kind he really was. Gentle, careful, the type of person who tried hard not to cause trouble for anyone. After an hour, they discovered a small wooden box half hidden under a patch of ivy. It was old, with peeling paint and a tiny metal latch that had rusted shut. Daniel stared at it for a moment. His expression shifted into something she couldn't read, a mix of surprise, nostalgia, and maybe a little fear. He said he had never seen it before, yet it was clear the box meant something, even if he didn't know what. Emily suggested they set it aside until they finished clearing the area. As they worked, she noticed the way he kept glancing at the box, almost as if it was calling to him somehow. Something in his posture changed, a bit sharper, more alert. The air felt different too. Not dangerous, just expectant. They eventually reached a good stopping point. Both of them were tired, covered in soil and bits of dry leaves, but oddly peaceful. Emily smiled and told him she didn't mind returning the next day to help him finish the job. For a moment, Daniel looked like he wanted to say something important. Instead, he simply thanked her again and picked up the wooden box. He held it in both hands, as if it were fragile. Emily noticed how tightly his fingers curled around it. Whatever was inside, he wasn't ready to open it yet, at least not alone. Before leaving, she glanced back one more time. Daniel stood in the center of the garden, staring at the box with a distant look. Something told her that finding it was only the beginning. Near the end of their conversation, she repeated the line he had heard her say earlier while joking about her love for storytelling videos. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. But when she walked toward her house, Daniel called her name softly. His voice carried a tone she hadn't heard from him before, unsure, almost vulnerable. He asked if she could stay for a moment longer. There was something he wanted her to see, something he wasn't ready to face alone. Emily turned back. And that was when everything began to change. Emily stepped back into the yard, brushing dirt from her palms. Daniel stood near the old wooden box, holding it like something inside might shift if he breathed too hard. The sun dipped behind the maple trees across the street. Soft orange light stretched across the garden, making every shadow feel deeper. Emily could tell he wasn't stalling. He was gathering courage. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally said he felt strange. Like the box had been waiting for him. Like it held something he wasn't sure he was ready to remember. Emily moved closer. Not too close, but enough that he knew she wasn't going anywhere. Daniel gave a small nod, almost as if that was all the reassurance he needed. He tried loosening the rusted latch. It didn't budge. He tried again, pressing harder this time. Still stuck. He let out a breath and set the box on the small stone path. Emily found a flat rock nearby and gently tapped the latch until it cracked open. A soft click echoed through the quiet yard. Daniel froze. Inside the box lay a stack of old letters tied with faded twine. Some envelopes were yellowed at the edges. Some looked newer, like they had been added at different times. Beneath them sat a small silver pendant shaped like a leaf, scratched but still beautiful. Daniel stared at the contents without touching them. His expression changed so slowly that Emily wasn't sure if he was remembering something or discovering it for the first time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. He said the pendant belonged to his mother. He remembered seeing it when he was little, brief flashes, like pieces of a dream he once had. Emily asked if the letters were hers too. Daniel didn't know. He reached forward and lifted the bundle, his fingers trembling just a little. He untied the twine and pulled the first envelope free. It had no name, no stamp, no date, just a single folded sheet inside. When he unfolded it, Emily saw his eyes scan the page once, twice, then stop. He didn't read it out loud. Instead, he swallowed thickly and looked away for a moment, trying to settle whatever emotion was hitting him. She waited. Quiet. Present. At last, he explained that the letter wasn't from his mother. It was from someone she had known long before he was born, someone who had been important to her in ways he never understood while she was alive. He didn't say more, and Emily didn't push, but she could sense that the words stirred something deeper than simple curiosity. Daniel slipped the letter back into its envelope. He closed the box, holding it against his chest for a long moment. Then he asked something unexpected. He asked if she could come inside for a few minutes, not because he needed help with anything heavy, but because he didn't want to read the rest of the letters alone. Emily hesitated only long enough to make sure he truly wanted company. He did. It was written all over his face. Daniel's house was quiet inside, almost too quiet. The living room was neat, but carried that subtle emptiness of a place where someone lived mostly in their own thoughts. He placed the box on the coffee table and sat beside it, elbows on his knees. Emily took the chair across from him, giving him space while staying close enough to be part of whatever came next. For a while, he didn't open the box again. He talked instead, softly, cautiously, about his childhood. About how kind his mother had been, but how she often kept parts of her past locked away. He always assumed she simply didn't like talking about old memories. Now he wondered if she had been trying to protect him from something she didn't want to relive. He reached for another envelope. This one had a name written in faint ink, a name he didn't recognize. Before he opened it, he looked up at Emily. There was uncertainty in his eyes, but also trust. The kind that forms quietly between two people who never planned to share anything personal, but somehow did. He unfolded the page. This time, his breath hitched. Emily leaned forward, searching his expression. Concern, confusion, a flicker of something close to disbelief, all tangled together. He lowered the paper slowly. When his eyes met hers, she felt a chill ripple through the room. He whispered that the letter mentioned him. And the words inside weren't what he expected at all. Daniel held the letter with both hands, the paper trembling slightly between his fingers. Emily could see how heavily the words sat on him. He wasn't just reading them, he was absorbing something that shook the foundation of what he believed about his own past. He said the letter came from a man named Thomas. The name didn't ring a bell for him, but the tone of the letter felt strangely familiar. Gentle, regretful, filled with a kind of quiet affection that hinted at a complicated history. The letter said Thomas had known Daniel's mother long before Daniel was born. It explained that he had wanted to be part of her life again, but circumstances had kept them apart. At the end, Thomas wrote that if she ever decided to tell Daniel the truth, he hoped the boy would not resent him for missing so many years. Emily watched as Daniel reread those lines, each time sinking a little deeper into thought. He finally set the letter down and rubbed the back of his neck, staring at the floor. She asked gently what he thought it meant. Daniel said he wasn't sure. His mother had never mentioned anyone named Thomas, never hinted at past relationships or unresolved ties that might explain this. What bothered him most was the way Thomas wrote about the truth, like there was something important that had been kept from him. He opened another envelope. This one had the same handwriting, the same soft tone, but it was written years later. The man wrote about moving to another state. He wrote about missing her, wondering how she was, and whether Daniel was growing up well. He also wrote that he hoped one day Daniel would understand why things had unfolded the way they had. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. The pieces were lining up, but he didn't want to jump to conclusions. He wasn't ready to claim something that might hurt more than help. Emily leaned forward, her voice calm and warm. She reminded him that he didn't need to figure it all out right away. He just had to breathe through it. He gave her a quiet smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Then he pulled out the last envelope. This one was different. Thicker, heavier. It looked newer than the others, like it had been added not long before his mother passed. Inside was a longer letter, several pages. The handwriting shook in certain places, as if the writer had been older or emotional while writing. Daniel's eyes scanned the opening sentences, and his breath faltered. Emily sat perfectly still, waiting. He read the next few lines. His jaw tightened. He paused again. When he finally looked up, the room felt unbelievably quiet. He said the man claimed to be his father. Not the father Daniel had grown up believing in, not the man his mother had spoken about when he was little, but someone entirely different, someone she had never mentioned in all his years of living. The letter explained that his mother had chosen to raise Daniel on her own after things fell apart between her and Thomas. It said she never told Thomas about certain reasons she stayed silent, but he hoped the letters would explain what she never could. Daniel lowered the pages slowly. He sat back, stunned, like someone had taken the ground out from beneath him. Emily stood and moved to sit beside him, keeping enough space so he didn't feel cornered, but close enough that he didn't feel alone. He said the part that hurt wasn't the idea of a different father. It was the fact that his mother had carried this alone for so many years, through so many struggles. Emily placed a gentle hand on the side of the coffee table, close enough for him to see, but not assuming he needed comfort he didn't ask for. Daniel held the pendant again. He squeezed it between his fingers, the way someone holds on to a memory they're terrified of losing. He admitted he didn't know what to do next. Should he look for Thomas? Should he let it go? Should he read the letter again or put everything back in the box? Emily said something simple, something that anchored him. She told him he didn't need to decide tonight, but he didn't have to face it alone either. Her words softened him. He let out a shaky breath, feeling the weight of the day settle across his shoulders. But before he could say more, a soft thud sounded from outside the living room window. It came from the direction of the garden. Both of them turned toward the sound. Daniel frowned. Emily felt a quiet shiver run through her. Something or someone was out there. The sound wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to break the quiet in the room. Daniel rose first, instinctively placing the letters back inside the wooden box. Emily followed him toward the window, both of them listening for another noise. Nothing, just the soft rustle of leaves outside. Daniel stepped onto the porch, cautious but not afraid. Emily stayed close, her eyes scanning the dim yard. The sun had slipped away completely, leaving the garden in a deep, muted blue. He moved toward the flower bed where they had found the box earlier. Emily walked beside him, her steps slow, steady. When they reached the center of the garden, Daniel knelt. Something had shifted in the soil. A small patch near the fence looked disturbed, as if someone had brushed against it or stepped there without meaning to. He checked the ground, brushing away loose dirt. Emily kept her eyes on the shadows near the fence, her heartbeat soft but noticeable. Then Daniel straightened. He wasn't frightened, just thoughtful. He said it could have been a raccoon or maybe the wind knocking something loose. This part of the neighborhood had plenty of wildlife, after all. But Emily wasn't convinced. The sound from inside the house had felt intentional, too solid to be an animal brushing past something, too quick to be something falling over on its own. Daniel noticed her concern and offered a gentle smile meant to reassure her. Still, he scanned the yard with the same uneasiness she felt. After a moment, he suggested they go back inside. Emily followed him, feeling the cool air settle around her as the porch door closed behind them. Back in the living room, the box sat quietly on the table, the letters tucked away again. It seemed almost out of place now, so small yet responsible for stirring up so much. Daniel sat down, rubbing his forehead. He looked exhausted, emotionally drained from all the revelations. Emily took the seat across from him once more. He thanked her for staying with him. He said he wasn't sure he could have opened those letters alone. She told him she was glad she could help, and that he didn't have to pretend to be okay. His voice softened when he replied. For the first time that evening, he let himself relax. They talked for a while, not about the letters, but about simple things, the neighborhood, work, memories of childhood summers. Emily tried to keep the conversation gentle, aware of how fragile his emotions were. After a few minutes, Daniel picked up the pendant again. He held it in his palm, staring at it with a mixture of longing and confusion. He said he remembered his mother wearing it only once, years ago. He had been too young to understand its significance. But now he wondered if she wore it for comfort or hope. He asked Emily what she thought. She said the pendant felt like a reminder of something meaningful, something she hadn't been ready to talk about, but unable to let go of entirely. He nodded, quietly accepting that possibility. Then, almost reluctantly, he asked if Emily thought he should try to find Thomas. She paused before answering, wanting to choose the right words. She told him that finding someone wasn't a guarantee of answers, and meeting a person tied to such a long hidden truth might bring healing or pain, maybe both. But she also said that sometimes people deserved to know where they came from, not because it changed who they were, but because it allowed them to understand themselves fully. Daniel listened closely. Her voice seemed to ground him more than anything else. He said he needed time, maybe a few days, to think before making any decision. Emily agreed. No rush, no pressure. A soft quiet filled the room, warm and steady. Then Daniel surprised her. He asked if she would return tomorrow to help him finish the garden, not just because he appreciated her help, but because he didn't want the day's discoveries to overshadow something his mother once loved. Emily felt a gentle warmth spread through her chest. She said yes. But as she stood to leave, something caught her eye. A small slip of paper had fallen out of the box onto the floor, half hidden under the coffee table. She bent and picked it up. It wasn't a letter. It was a torn piece of map, old, faded, and marked with a tiny red circle around a place name neither of them recognized. Emily held it up. Daniel's eyes widened, the color draining slightly from his face. He whispered that he had seen that name before, but not in any of the letters. Daniel took the torn map from Emily's hand and held it close, studying the faded names along its creases. The tiny red circle marked a small town 2 states away, a town Emily had never heard of. But Daniel had. He said he once found the same name scribbled in an old notebook of his mother's. He never thought much of it at the time, just a place she might have visited before he was born. But the map, the circle, the letters, they all pointed towards something she had kept tucked away from both of them. Emily watched him sink into the couch, the map resting against his knee. He wasn't overwhelmed now. He was focused, searching, trying to understand the pattern forming in front of him. He whispered that maybe his mother had planned to take him there one day. Maybe she had wanted to tell him everything the letters described, but life had never given her the chance. Emily sat beside him, keeping her voice soft. She asked if the town could be where Thomas lived, or where something important between his mother and Thomas had happened. Daniel nodded slowly. He said it felt like a piece of the story she wanted him to find, even if she couldn't be the one to guide him to it. He folded the map carefully and placed it beside the pendant. 2 small clues, 2 fragile threads that connected him to a truth he was only beginning to face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was thoughtful, grounded. Then Daniel looked at Emily, really looked at her, and told her something that caught her off guard. He said he didn't know how he would have handled the day if she hadn't stopped by that morning. He said her kindness had turned a simple offer to help into something far more meaningful. Emily felt a warmth rise in her chest, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just steady and true. She reminded him she had only offered a hand in the garden. But Daniel shook his head gently. He said she had done much more than that. He stood and walked to the window, staring out at the yard they had worked on together. The garden looked different now, not finished, but beginning to breathe again. He said he wanted to keep restoring it, not because it was a chore or an obligation, but because it was a way to honor the mother he missed more than he ever admitted. Emily joined him at the window. She told him she would help him finish it, no matter how long it took. His quiet smile in response felt like the first real moment of peace he had experienced all day. They stepped outside again, just to feel the night air and look at the yard from a fresh perspective. The sky was a deep navy blue, dotted with faint stars. The garden carried the soft scent of earth and fresh-cut vines. Daniel said he was thinking about visiting the town circled on the map, not immediately, but soon. He wanted to understand the full story, even if the answers were hard. Emily nodded. She told him that whatever he decided, he didn't have to make the trip alone unless he wanted to. He didn't reply right away. Instead, he turned to her with an expression she hadn't seen before, a mix of gratitude, hope, and something gentle that felt almost fragile. He said he wasn't sure what the trip would reveal. He wasn't sure if Thomas would still be there, or if the town held any clues at all. But he did know one thing. He didn't want to face the next steps of his life feeling alone. Emily placed a light hand over his, just a simple gesture, enough to let him know she wasn't going anywhere. They stood there in the quiet yard, surrounded by shadows and broken soil, but also by the promise of something healing, something new. The night felt different now, less uncertain, more alive. Daniel finally let out a slow breath and said he hoped tomorrow would be easier. Emily told him tomorrow didn't have to be easy, it just had to be honest. He smiled again, this time with a softness that reached his eyes. Then he said something she would remember for a long time. He said that sometimes unexpected things arrive in a person's life at the exact moment they needed them most, like a hidden box in a forgotten garden or a neighbor who knocked on the fence at just the right time. Emily felt a gentle warmth rise in her chest, not love, not yet, but the beginning of something real, something that could grow, slowly, the way a garden does when someone finally chooses to tend it. As they walked back inside, the night settled around them like a quiet promise. The letters, the pendant, the map, they were no longer just reminders of what had been lost. They were pieces of a path forward. And Emily sensed that whatever came next, whatever truths waited in that small, distant town, Daniel wouldn't have to face them on his own. Not anymore. The story ends here, but their journey is only beginning.